Hello, Augies Worldwide. I'm Dave Katzler, amateur radio call sign KE0OG, here with another episode of the Commentariat. This is Commentariat number 4, where once a week we can all just sit down and look at the comments together and provide responses or see what we're doing about them. The first comment here comes from Brian Starkey, and it's on the applying and handling of lightning arresters, number 468. Need to attach a connector to the arrestor since it doesn't have the long protrusion that goes through the copper bar, which I do have. What crimping tool works with solid number 6 ground wire, and what connectors would you use? Well, this is a lightning arrestor right here, and there is this long bar. It's just thread. It's stainless steel. It is 20 threads per inch, and it's a 1/4 inch screw. Okay, and there's a lock washer there. And so if you have a copper backing plate on your ground rod, which you can get easily from any of the major suppliers like DX Engineering, you just screw that thing on. This will be on the ground. You have your coax from your antenna here and going out to the radio here into the house. You want to keep these outside. You want to keep lightning outside the house. This is a model TT3G50, and it comes in 2 flavors, 200 watt or 2000 watt. Okay, so get the one you're actually going to use. If you use a 100 watt antenna, 100 watt radio, use the 200. The only difference between the two is the little actual spark chamber, which is this little part here. And because it's red, I know it's the lower power one. You put these on this little screw-on cap and put this back into here. You can get replacements for these regularly. The thing fails closed, so if you have a high SWR, you know to go look at this. And you're supposed to do this finger tight. Okay? So, need to attach a connector to the arrestor. Actually, you should connect the arrestor directly to the ground rod. Since it doesn't have the long protrusion that goes through the copper bar, which I do have. What crimping tools work with solid number 6 ground wire? I guess about any crimping tool, but I would keep that piece between the lightning arrestor and the ground rod extremely short as you can get it. One thing that I have done in the past is put this up against the ground rod here and put a hose clamp around it, stainless steel hose clamp around it, and tighten that down. That'll give you a very good solid connection. You don't ever solder connections for these lightning arresters, because during the moment of lightning or a near strike, these will, for an extremely brief interval, handle an extremely high current. And that extremely high current will make everything very hot, enough to melt solder. So we don't solder, we crimp or we clamp or do something like that. So Brian, I hope that helps answer your question. Now, this one has to do with broadband antennas for SDR radios, wideband antennas for SDR radios. Chris says, you of course want to ground the radio like it's supposed to be ground, which is how exactly? Total noob on the grounding front here. You have your antenna coming in somehow to that thing. And I'll just show you on here's my SDR, okay? And this is where the antenna comes in. It's almost always like this. This is a microwave connector, okay? They're readily available. There are also available these tools so you can plug a regular SO239 into that. This right here is ground. Okay, so you can put a little clamp around that or something like that to make that ground, and then run that to your ground system. I don't, because the switch that switches this thing to different antennas is grounded, and it's only about this far away, so that seems to do okay. Fred Bissonette, in talking about vertical antennas and radials, says 16 radials seem to work very well for me on my 20-meter vertical. And it will. It should work very well for you. You know, the more radials you add, the closer you're getting to the point of diminishing returns. If you ever run up with some extra wire, maybe run that up to 30 radials. It might give you just a titch more, but like I said, you're rapidly getting to the point of getting very little bang for the buck. On the electric blanket antennas, ham radio adventures with K0PIR says, good to see you. By the way, that electric blanket as an antenna was in response. Somebody wrote and said they saw the article about the glove antenna, which I suspect was in the April issue of last year. I haven't looked. But then they tried an electric blanket antenna. An electric blanket is a big resistor. In other words, it's a dummy load, so it's not going to transmit much. However, there's another interesting comment coming. Okay, Glenn Martin. Thank you, Dave. There are people who have lithium batteries without any battery management system. Scary. I am a retired chemist. That scares the heck out of me. It took me several months to convince one of my acquaintances to get a battery management system. A bit later, one of his relatives had a new EV burn up after he pulled it from the garage and headed for work. I had UPS for laboratory equipment and was always checking the system for problems. That was with lead-acid batteries. Fortunately, no problem on my watch. Thank you again. Glenn, dealing with batteries is always an issue because it's condensed power, so to speak. Lead-acid batteries were, the real technology development for them was during World War II, World War I and World War II, since they were used to power submarines underwater. They had electric motors in them. In fact, there's a major manufacturer of submarines called Electric Boat. I don't know if they're still around or if they've been absorbed into another company, but they had big lead-acid batteries. Lead-acid batteries are relatively benign as long as you don't break one and get sulfuric acid all over yourself. When I was a teenager, I worked at a motorcycle shop, and so when people bought batteries, I would fill them and put a little more charge on them. And I always got holes in my pants. They didn't have a nice big plastic apron. And sulfuric acid will eat through pretty much anything. Now, I say benign, but if you're in a submarine and you happen to get salt water into an electric battery, you have a real issue. I mean, a possibly sink the submarine kind of issue, because the salt water will short everything that's in the batteries, and an awful lot of energy will be released, and you can have fires and stuff like that. So as far as lithium-ion batteries, this is from BioNO. They're a major supplier of lithium iron phosphate batteries to the ham radio community, I think also to the RV community. This happens to be a 12 amp hour, 12 volt, nominally 12 volt. I say nominally because it's actually closer to 13 and a half. This top part right here that you see around here, on top is the battery management system, which will keep it from doing strange and unnatural things. And If you make your own batteries, you need a battery management system. Now, the lithium iron phosphate are pretty stable, but some of the other lithium batteries made from individual cells are just looking for an excuse to burn. So please be very careful with them. There's a reason there's a battery management system in each of those. This comment has to do with QuartzFest. Thanks, Dave. When I retire in 2 years, the first place we are going to take our RV is to QuartzFest. I hope to meet you there. I do too. I hope I will see you there. This year we kept the motorhome in town, and then I drove the Jeep out to attend the sessions. This put us in a RV park, so we had hookups. Out at QuartzFest proper, they have absolutely no hookups of any kind. But it's a lot of fun. You saw the pictures in the video. I would suggest to anybody who's going to QuartzFest, they might think, a lot of us are pretty modest, maybe too modest about our own abilities, and think we have nothing to say of interest to other hams. Well, don't think that way. Find something you'd like to make a presentation on for about an hour, or 40 minutes plus questions, and volunteer at QuartzFest. They had far too few speakers this year, and they need to have more. Try and get it with something you can demonstrate, like hooking a battery to a VHF rig or something like that, and talk about sizing the battery, whatever. That would be a very nice presentation for QuartzFest. Eddie says, thanks, Dave. We did meet briefly at QuartzFest a few years back. QuartzFest is up there with Field Day as my #1 ham radio activity. From K6STW. QuartzFest is unique in that it lasts an entire week. Most ham fests do not. And because QuartzFest is held on BLM land for free, we have to abide by the BLM rules. They don't want any commercial marketing, so you won't see any vendors there. They do have a Saturday morning swap fest. And the thing about it is that it's got to truly be a swap fest. You can't be a vendor who sells new stuff there. It's just the BLM rules. But it is a week long, so it's a very laid back, very nice week. I enjoy it, and we'll be back this next year. Life and Death says, Dave, lots of lithium batteries are homemade from large cells bought from China, so there is no battery management system unless someone chooses to add one. There are a number of BMSs available out there with different feature sets, prices, and capabilities. Well, I think that's a very good idea. In fact, I'm going to give that one another thumbs up. Yes, do that. Do not walk around with something that can catch fire. These don't so much, the lithium iron phosphate. This is the chemistry you should go with, and yes, it should have a battery management system. I showed pictures of the battery management system for that great big lithium ion battery that they had there at Discount Solar. Electric blanket antenna, Tommy LeBeouf says, I used one all winter. Like it. This turned out to be kind of a funny thing. An electric blanket antenna is just a big resistor, and you can try it. I wouldn't try to put 100 watts through it. You probably pop the little breakers they've got in there that keep that thing safe. But you could, I suppose. Outside in the middle of a rock pile with 3 fire extinguishers ready to go. Electric blankets are fire hazards, always have been, always will be. I lost a couple of friends due to electric blanket fires back when I was a kid. They have changed the construction of the electric blankets. All through them are little sensors. They're basically just little heat-activated reeds. They break the contact if it gets too hot. If those don't reset automatically, then the blanket's dead, and you end up having to get another. We have a pile of dead electric blankets. Just use them as blankets. But they are worse of an idea as an antenna. Okay, maybe with 5 watts attached to an HT. But consider this. Remember that electric blankets are also only rated to 120 volts AC. Your radio has potential to reach hundreds of volts, especially with a high SWR, which you would have, of course, on an electric blanket. I don't think I'll ever try doing that. Machine decoding of Morse code is an unsolved problem. I said that because I have not yet seen a decoder available to amateurs that's any good with human sent Morse code. If you're sending it with a keyer or a keyboard, it's beautifully sent code with perfect spacing. Yeah, you can do pretty good with it. But human sent code has variations in timing in there which throw those decoders off. I did my master's thesis on this many years ago, 1974. So that was what, 50 years ago? AEA, he said, Mark Stevens says, I think AEA PK232 did Morse. It did. It would both send it and attempt to receive it. It was really lousy at decoding it. There are a lot of people who say Morse code is a digital mode. In fact, the original digital mode. I disagree. Because the timing parameters in machine-sent Morse code are a lot more the timing parameters in human-sent Morse code are quite random. And the spacing looks more like analog than it does digital. Yes, it's a 0 or it's a 1, but the length of the dit and the da is quite variable. Maybe with machine learning or artificial intelligence technology, somebody can come up with a foolproof decoder. If you look at the reverse beacon network, they have very wideband receivers that are basically sucking up all the Morse, all the FT8, and so on, and putting the call signs on their spotters. And they do pretty good. However, I have noticed in trying to get my station to trigger the reverse beacon, I have to send beautiful Morse code with a keyer, with the keyer in here. Now there's a technique in the 7300. Sometimes keyers, you go da, 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 and then it won't enforce the space before the next letter. And that's bad because it can really confuse the Morse detector for the reverse beacon network. So there is a position on here, a menu setting, to where the keyer will enforce the timing between letters. So if you start to send a letter too soon, it'll hold it and send it a little later. You have to kind of get in the rhythm of it because it's correcting for your errors. When you do that, yes, reverse beacon network will catch it. But otherwise, it's really hard to use hand-sent Morse and have the reverse beacon network see it. So that's why I say it's still an unsolved problem. I have yet to see, my own eyes, a Morse code detector that can pick through lousy code and make something of it. Now your brain can, so it can be done, but I've not seen it done. Okay. Electric blanket antenna, Jerry Sherrar doesn't recommend it. You don't even cover how to solder to nichrome wire. It's just heat. It just makes heat. Nichrome, nickel chromium wire makes heat without it burning up in the atmosphere. Okay, whereas if you use tungsten, you can heat it to the point of incandescence, but only if it is in a neutral atmosphere, like argon or something like that. By the way, they put the argon in those bulbs for two reasons. They're less likely to break because they don't have a vacuum in them. The early Edison bulbs had a vacuum in them. And second, it will transfer the heat out and away from the filament. So it makes it much less likely that the filament will burn up. Of course, that's obsolete technology now, but it was used for years. And so that will conclude our commentariat for today. If you would like to have your comment responded to, do it Wednesday morning, wherever you are, because I usually do this video Wednesday afternoon. Because I can't get through all of them. I wish I could, but it would take an hour-long video to do that. So thank you very much for your comments. Thank you for your support of this channel. And there you have it. If you'd like to help support this channel financially, you can do so via a comment like that. Or you can simply go to dcasler.com/support and look for a method that works for you. I'm recommending Patreon right now. Until we next meet, 73.